Hello everyone. I thought I would make a quick off-the-cuff video after listening to Sargon of Akkad have a conversation with the skeptical feminists. In the conversation, Sargon and Russian Deadpool spoke to, say, some considerable length on what was intersectionality and what comprises intersectionality. Now, intersectionality is a really twisted knot that I don't think Sargon did well to explain, nor did Russian Deadpool. Intersectionality also has a secondary name to it, which is the Kyriarchy. It's kind of a replacement for the patriarchy, as it brings in, rather than men just generally oppressing women, you get the hierarchy of oppressions that come down. It's not only men oppressing women, it's whites oppressing blacks, it's natives oppressing foreigners, and so forth. So I thought I would just go over a few points on that. Now, intersectionality is inherently a problem. It has major issues within it, and despite individuals' defense of it trying to say that it is, in effect, a way to make a larger barn for which to hold conventions in, it instead just creates more and more distinct stalls to cram people into. It is the identity politics game refined. So we know that within intersectionality, identity is everything. Starting at the top, you have the most obvious one coming from the feminist side of things, being gender or sex, men, women. But it's also added in all other elements. You have race, national origin, ethnicity, religion, first language, whether you identify as an atheist or not. You have sexual orientation, and so forth. This is not done to make people more inclusive. This is done to better define who a person is. Not what a person is. Most people, when we look at these labels, will say, yeah, that's kind of what they are. They have no control over many of these things, so who gives a shit? But within intersectionality, it helps them define who a person is. Let me just draw a very brief example here to help elucidate what I'm trying to say. So you have two women. One, in the intersectional sense, is a cis, hetero, white, female, attractive, fit, middle income. On the other side, you have a cis, female, homosexual, black, overweight. I've used many identifiers in both cases, and you'll see why this is important as I go along. If both these individuals were to be placed at a convention, some intersectionality convention, and had to be rated on who would have more prominence to speak, intersectionality would say that because white oppresses black and because heterosexuality oppresses homosexuality, the black woman would get to speak first. You can see how this just obliterates nuance. I'm going to take a step out of this now and say, let's say the black woman, despite having low income, is actually from a relatively wealthy family. But because she went and did gender studies, she doesn't have a very good income. Let's also say she had very few things bothering her growing up. She was well provided for, had the ability to go to a decent college, and really didn't have to do a lot of extraneous adult things until she was an actual adult. Whereas on the other side, our straight white girl in this case comes from a broken home, an alcoholic father, and a pill-popping mother. The father leaves because he's an alcoholic and abusive and just a complete miscreant, whereas the mother barely makes it by with her middle-class job, popping pills, and every time mom goes down into a comatose state due to too many quaaludes, the daughter worries whether or not her mom's going to, one, come out of it, and two, have a job at the end of it. So she manages the finances, looks after her two younger brothers because the mother had to actually give her body up to her abusive husband in order to prevent beatings in his drunken state. Those stories are very different. But if you were to take those stories with the individuals, you could still have good stories, right? You have on one side a woman who tries to keep her family together when she was younger and now has grown up and knows the importance of working hard and family and discipline and not falling harm to addiction or abusive individuals. Whereas on the other side, you have someone who is certain that she is doing the right thing through activism, and that's why she got her degree in gender studies. Now, I'm not saying that's a good degree, because it's actually a pretty shit degree. However, you have an opportunity for a good story there. But if you were to take these two people and say one of you gets to speak, the black gay woman would be given the stage. Because nuance is scrubbed in this case. It is gone. It is removed. And what we're more concerned about within intersectionality is what you are, not who you are. But when it comes to the actual feminist rubric in this case, what you are becomes who you are. It is defining of who you will be based upon what you are. If you're black, you will be this, often stereotypical. If you are a man, you'll be this, again, often stereotypical. There's very few things that work. Now, that was part one of this. Part two is, I think, more important, and hopefully this example that I just gave shows you how part two actually works. What makes intersectionality so virulent, if you will, is how it is modular by nature. When you have identities, you can turn particular identities on and off to suit what the situation is. So let's take a man. We'll call him John. John gets in trouble with the law and is beaten by police. John happens to be a young black man, unemployed, not much going for him. The media will report this very much, or at least in the feminist side of things, that he is a black, underprivileged man. This obviously is very important. So in this case, we have the module of gender and race turned on. Oh, and his socioeconomic status, equally important in this case. So all three of those are turned on. Very, very important, very prominent. John, after being released from a short stint in jail, goes home and beats the shit out of his girlfriend. Just brutalizes her, right? To report this, we're going to turn off the module of race, and we're going to only talk about his gender. This matters more than anything else. Despite the fact that he is still a black man, he's still a Christian, he's still low socioeconomic status, he's still unemployed, he's still straight, all of those don't matter anymore. We've turned those modules off. Those gears are no longer spinning in this machine. It's only his sex that matters. And this is pretty much how the game is played. You turn on and off different gears, different modules, in order to better build a stronger narrative. Let's use the cologne sex attacks. Most of us would have looked at that. I think the majority of rational people looked at that and said, the act of Taharush was used by these men to exploit and harm women. Not because they were women, it's because they are men, or however else it was rationalized. What we saw from the rational side of us said, no, this is Islamic by nature. This is within an Islamic culture, driven by Islam. Maybe that culture isn't 100% Islam, but Islam shaped that culture for which these men were raised in, and that culture is abhorrent. And it allows them to justify heinous acts of sexual violence against women, because that's what Islam entails. Feminists, on the other hand, looked at what they were dealing with. So you had men. Okay, there's one module. You had their race. They're brown. They're Middle Eastern. They're African. So we'll turn that one on. What else do you have? Are they straight? Yes, they're straight. Not as important, so we're going to ignore that module. Their religion? Religion gets tricky here, so we're going to ignore that module. Turn the religion module off. Culture. Oh, we'll keep the culture module on. That's interesting. So now the modules we have left are men from an Islamic culture, not Islam, but Islamic culture. And they're straight. And we're going to talk about how these men have different values, and that why aren't feminists talking about this? Where we're going to talk about the feminists who ought to be talking about it, who aren't talking about it. And when we do talk about it, finally, we're going to talk about it in ways of their race. Right? So the reason these claims were made against them was because of their race. Not because of their religion, not because of their orientation, but because of their race. They are brown, so the only reason you would say that these men committed Taharush was because they're brown. The module that ought to be on, the religious one, has been turned off because it doesn't suit the narrative. Suddenly, you have a rape culture, a legitimate, exportable rape culture that has been removed from the conversation because that's too tricky of a topic to engage in. And this game is played over and over again. That's why when we see guys like Gadsad come up and talk about some genuinely interesting topics, and he gets challenged by these hardliner feminists out there, radical feminists. I want to do some service to the skeptical feminists here because I thought they did a really good job on Sargon's podcast. These radical feminists, he plays that joke card of, well, he's a brown Jew from Lebanon that escaped persecution and is overweight. So it's funny to see that because he knows how they turn these modules on and off in order to accommodate a suddenly very pliable hierarchy of oppression. If they think they're going to lose out in the way of oppression based upon all modules on, they begin to turn off certain modules until they optimize to being more oppressed than whatever the topic is about. And that's why, coming back around to the Cologne example, we weren't talking about religion, because religion is too large of a monolith to tackle. Instead, it's easier to talk about these men who did this from this different culture and how women shouldn't be talking about it, because now we're looking at women who ought to be talking about it, and we're talking about it because all these men called us out, so therefore it's actually men oppressing women in this case. But not the brown men, because that'd be racist. It is a dynamic, active system in order to better build a narrative. That is what intersectionality is. I think it was really important to add that in because Sargon got very close to defining it. Not only that, it uses these identities in order to better box people out, and that these identities to define what a person is become who a person is, but that it's not done in a static manner. It's not all on at all times. That it was designed to create individual modules of identity that can be toggled on and off as needed to build the better narrative, to build a better story, to build a more dynamic hierarchy of oppression. It is a tool similar to that of critical theory that has been so gloriously abused that those of us who are aware of it can derive endless humor. I hope this was informative for people. Again, if you like what I say, subscribe, follow me on Twitter, go check out my blog. Have a great day.